power meters are a fantastic tool for training and also a perfect tool to get the most out of your event, as well as getting the best out of your own personal fitness.
That's right, so we are going to give you some tips fairly shortly on how to do just that, using me as an example and how I'm going to use numbers to perfectly pace the Maratona dles Dolomites here in Alta Badia.
One of the most beautiful yet brutal aspects of the Maratona is that there's hardly any flat. Straight from the start, you got the Campolungo, then onto the Pordoi, then the Sella, etc. The climbs come thick and fast.
And what that means is that it's very easy to go too hard at the start. So let's try to make a pacing strategy based on known fitness levels.
Yeah, now first off, you're going to need to know your FTP, your functional threshold power. And if you don't already know it and don't know how to do it, there is a link at the end of the video to show you exactly how to work that out.
Yeah, well, based on recent tests, my current FTP is around about 300 watts. But you're also going to need to take into account your weight, because that is going to affect how fast you can go up climbs given your current FTP.
Now, we've actually taken the time to work out exactly how much climbing is in this event. So I hope you sat down. First off, 4,230 metres of elevation gain, and that totals 53.5 kilometres of uphill riding with an average gradient of 7.9%. That's pretty punchy, isn't it?
That's very tough indeed. And if you go onto the bike calculator website online and shove in some numbers, including my weight, which is 71 kilograms, and my threshold of 300 watts, even if I did all of that climbing at my threshold of 300 watts, it would take me over 2.5 hours, and that is just not possible.
So how do we work out Dan's pacing? Well, the answer actually lies within our top 10 most commonly used cycling phrases.
Epic.
It might be epic, Dan, but on this particular occasion, the word I'm looking for is actually tempo, otherwise known as Zone 3. Now, Zone 3 is a pace that you can ride at, or you should be able to ride at, for around 3 hours, or even more if you have little breaks. Now, of course, on the Maratona, there are plenty of breaks in the form of multiple descents. Now, in terms of your FTP, you should be riding at between 75 and 90% of your FTP, which for you, Dan, works out at roughly between 230 and 270 watts.
Now, going back to our bike calculator, if I average, let's say 250 watts for the climbs, those 53.5 kilometres of climbing will take me a little over 4 hours. And I'd say that's just about doable for me with those descents to break things up. So what I will be doing is making sure I don't go above 250 watts average on the first 4 climbs, they being the Campolungo, the Pordoi, the Sella and the Gardena. And that way, as long as I fuel myself properly, I should get to the last 3 climbs with enough left in the tank to get through, and possibly even lift my pace on the last climb, which is the hardest.
So how does this equate to other events? Now, firstly and importantly, you need to know how long the event would take you, and secondly, the nature of the course. Now, this table by Dr. Andy Coggan of the 7 zones will actually help you further understand what exactly the power zones are, and more importantly, how long you can spend in each of the zones in one single effort.
Now, if your Sportive or Gran Fondo is relatively flat for the most part, but then with a big final climb up towards the finish, a bit like l'Étape-du-Tour in 2017, then you should be able to expect to conserve quite a bit of energy over that first flatter part by surfing the wheels and staying out of the wind. And then you should be able to expect to do that final climb at the lower end of Zone 4, which is quite close to your FTP. All you need to do is make sure that over that first part, your average power remains in the endurance zone. So for me, with an FTP of 300 watts, that would mean an average power in that first part of less than 225 watts.
On the other hand, if your Sportive or event is consistently hilly, but without any long climbs, then normalised power is a fantastic tool, as that takes into account the shorter, sharper efforts. But if you do that, it's important to remember that your normalised power should sit within a zone that you know you can sustain for the whole duration of the event.
Yeah, now before we finish, we should add one last caveat to all of this, and that is that for two riders of the same FTP, let's say 300 watts, the rider that does 20 hours on the bike each week might be slightly more efficient than somebody that does it with just 5 hours on the bike each week. So you should bear that in mind when you're working out what end of each zone you are aiming to sustain for the duration of the event. So take, for example, the tempo zone, zone 3, that ranges for 75 to 90%. If you're spending an enormous amount of time on the bike each week, you could aim for the higher end of that zone. But if you're only spending a few hours on the bike each week, you might want to aim for the lower part.
Yeah. Now, for some more training content or content that's anything to do with cycling, how about clicking just here on the globe to subscribe to the Global Cycling Network? It is absolutely free. Now, to learn how to calculate your FTP, your functional threshold power, click just down here.
Yeah, or if normalised power is quite an alien term to you and you want to learn about that and a whole host of other training metrics to do with power, there's a video explaining it all just down here.